While I tend not to cover many smaller brands on this channel with their own dedicated videos, now and then a watch comes along from a smaller independent or micro brand that simply delivers something special that can stand out, even when stacked up against giants of the industry. In this video, we're gonna be looking at a brand that I think fits that mold, with that being anOrdain. It's a watch showcasing the brand's specialty, which is their hand-enameled dials. So let's take a closer look at this Scottish brand because they are certainly worthy of being on your radar. And guys, before we jump into this video, if you like all thing kind of micros, independence, I have a really helpful blog and guide looking at some of the best in the industry in 2021. So I will link to that down below, looking at over 20 different brands mentioned in that blog. So definitely go check it out. Link in the description on teddybaldassarre.com. Now let's begin with a brief history and background on anOrdain. Initially conceived in 2015, anOrdain's mission in regards to their approach is to combine contemporary design with traditional craft. In this case, leaning into the art form of enameling. For a quick introduction, enameling is a process of fusing powdered glass with a metallic-based material, and it is a notoriously difficult process to get right, requiring a great deal of experimentation and skill on behalf of the actual craftsman. Enameling is seldom seen at more approachable price ranges, being most frequently executed by high horology brands. After a few years of research and development, anOrdain released their first watch in 2018, the Model 1. With the dial emulating a cartographic map from an area surrounding a Scottish lake called Loch anOrdain, the Model 1's first limited run quickly sold out and a new brand was born. Since then, anOrdain has released several watches, including their take on a field-oriented layout with the Model 2, as well as a series of updates to the original Model 1 that were unveiled in 2020, including this new Plum Fume variant. Like a number of other brands in this space, anOrdain utilizes Swiss third-party calibers, but the rest of the production, from the initial design, the final assembly, and the enameling process is all handled by a small team at the brand's Glasgow facility. And really, this is the reason why I wanted to cover this brand. I've yet to cover them in more detail, but I just found myself very drawn to their dials when I first just kind of became aware of them and got to handle their pieces about a year and a half ago. So really excited to actually take a closer look at their pieces in the metal here today. While there are other aspects of this watch, the star of the show, without a doubt, is the dial, which benefits from anOrdain's aforementioned experience with vitreous enamel. In terms of the actual process, this type of enameling involves a wafer-thin metal disc that will become the dial in multiple layers of glass enamel powder that's deftly sifted on, layer by layer, and fired at upwards of 800 degrees Celsius. This involved undertaking often doesn't result in a viable final product if any of the variables in the chain are even slightly off. Getting back to this Model 1 though, the primary dial surface exhibits a vibrant shade of red referred to as plum by the brand. At the center, there is a smoked fume effect and will darken as you approach the dial's perimeter. To contrast, the dial exhibits printed Arabic hour markers at the even positions and extended linear indicators at the odd hour positions. Again, making use of a non-traditional color palette, the dial printing is executed in a subdued golden shade that works well with the rest of the dial, while also matching the heat-treated short syringe style handset. Actual heat treatment of watch hands is a rarer technique for a brand operating in this price range, but it probably is less of a surprise here given anOrdain's know-how. In addition to the striking dial, the execution of the case is also worthy of closer inspection, as the Model 1 leans into a somewhat dressy polishing throughout the case top, sides, and bezel, as well as subtle architecture that provides some visual interest without forcefully pulling the eye away from the all-important allure of that enamel surface dial. At the lugs, it features some sculpted architecture with a polished bevel on the surface of its lugs, with an inconspicuous facet on the interior, aiding in its ability with catching the light while still remaining subtle. A sign push-pull crown is located in the traditional 3 o'clock position that is slightly recessed into the case to provide additional protection from knocks, but can lead to a cumbersome activation of pulling out if you have larger hands. The screw-down case back is simply adorned with the brand name as well as "New Hands, Old Crafts," speaking to anOrdain's use of age-old enameling techniques. Gazing at the watch from the front, we have a slightly domed sapphire crystal described as having 6 layers of AR coating. Sounds impressive. However, it is unfortunately still producing a considerable amount of glare when viewed at certain angles. I normally wouldn't be as hard on a watch in its effectiveness against glare, but any obstruction of the dial just feels like a crime in this instance just because it looks so fantastic. And if there's any crystal worthy of AR coating on both sides or just some improvements in this area, it's this one. On the wrist, the 38mm wide by 46mm long case wears precisely in line with its diameter while remaining compact with its 11mm thickness. In its totality, this is a relatively smaller watch, but it does get a boost in its presence just visually by way of its dial. Set within 18mm lugs, anOrdain did not decide to cut any corners and offered a black Cordovan leather strap that tapers down to a signed 16mm pin buckle. This strap reminds me greatly of the straps paired with Nomos dress watches from the Orion, the Tangente is just a couple examples, and those straps are wonderful and ones that break in well over time, and really the same thing is on display here. As a warning sign for those with smaller wrists, say around 6 inches or 15.24 centimeters and below, you might find yourself looking for an additional hole in the strap in order to get a snug fit, but opting for a third-party strap to accentuate the dial in this instance is not the worst position to be in either. As mentioned, the anOrdain Model 1 leans into the use of a third-party caliber, here opting with the near ubiquitous ETA 28-24-2. As a side note, if you're looking for more general overview on most common third-party options on the market when it comes to movements, I have an entire video on the subject, so I will link to that one in the description down below. Examining the 28-24 though, we have a movement that sets the standard for what a third-party automatic caliber should be from Switzerland. It has been a fixture in Swiss watchmaking for decades, being utilized from a myriad of brands out there. Its straightforward architecture offers great reliability, proven with its years in the market, ease of regulation, and solid out-of-the-box performance. What is more of a talking point though is that anOrdain doesn't simply drop a fully stocked movement into their watches, as is common with many micro brands and smaller independents, but rather they have their own full-time watchmaker who assembles each one of these watches and regulates each movement to ensure you're getting the best out of the caliber, as this one is running around 3 seconds off from perfect time of day when testing with our time grapher. In addition, the movement is going to be modified to remove the second position for the date when engaging that crown as well, so no ghost date in this instance. In terms of the specs for the ETA 28-24, pretty standard. We're talking 4 Hertz, 28,800 vibrations per hour. It does feature hacking and hand winding, hacking stopping the second hand when you pull the crown out to the farthest position, and a power reserve of 38 hours. All right, so now to take a closer look at this anOrdain. Now, full context, I had no intention of covering this watch with its own dedicated video. Originally, I just requested this watch to be sent one for loan and just have it appear in a Kevin O'Leary video just because I thought their dials are cool and I think he'd get a kick out of it by showcasing it in a lineup of watches that normally he would not see. But after spending some time with it, I just was like, I need to cover this in more detail because this is just a killer looking dial. And in a world of, say, micro brands, independents, mostly micro brands, I would say, it's difficult to find brands that are truly doing something artisanal in their approach. And these dials are worthy of that type of classification. It's more bespoke type of work that they're doing with these in this craft of enameling. This is probably the best representation of doing it in this price range. These by no means are affordable watches. They still are, I mean, you have to pay a pretty penny to get these watches, but what you're getting here, I think, is something that's unique. And I wanted to just highlight this brand a bit more because when you can find people that genuinely are doing things that they love and kind of going the extra mile in certain circumstances, I always just like just covering those type of stories and those type of brands. That was a big reason why I wanted to go to RGM in Lancaster, Pennsylvania and cover that brand, because they're doing things that normal brands are not doing. It's truly more of a unique type of execution. And I think in some elements, maybe not from the watchmaking perspective, but from the craftsmanship around the enameling of these dials, it tells a story. And this is just a cool brand. For people that are in the know of them, it seems like they have a very loyal following, and for good reason. These are ones that really stand up well. I tried to really, show through that macro footage, I hope, just the elements of this dial that pull you in as a viewer. And I hope that the macro footage does this dial justice. When you catch it at the right angle, the anti-reflective coating is a bit of a bummer in some instances because it's a bit glary. But when you catch it at that right angle, oh my goodness, it really just pulls you in. But other than that, I really don't have much else to say about these watches. I just think they're incredibly cool looking. The dials speak for themselves. And this is a brand that I think more people just simply need to be aware of, and wanted to cover them in some more detail today. But all right, guys, I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please give it a thumbs up, subscribe, hit the bell icon. That really does help out the channel. Do appreciate that as well. Also, what do you think of these anOrdain watches? And in addition to that, do you like covering watches of this style? This is like one of those things whenever I ask, like, yeah, cover more of these just style of brands that maybe aren't as well known. I do it, and then more people just don't watch them. So it's like one of those things where people say one thing, but they act in a totally different way. But I'm happy to do it. I enjoy covering things that are not as conventional all the time, and this is a brand I think is certainly worthy of some coverage. In addition, guys, definitely check out TeddyBaldassarre.com, full authorized dealer of over 30 brands, quick and fast fulfillment, dedicated customer support. Also, 9 out of every $10 that we generate goes right back into the content that we're creating, helping to foster up a new generation of watch enthusiasts in the process. Also, be sure to follow on Instagram so you can stay up to date with the content, see some cool photos of watches, including some awesome ones of this anOrdain. But guys, thank you again so much for watching. Be well, and I will see you all very soon.